go ahead and start. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming to another one of our speaker events. Tonight we have Jonah Lobe, our amazing character and concept designer. So we're very excited to have him, and I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. So as always, we'll have our 45-minute presentation, and then at the end we'll have our Q&A. So let's go. I'll pass it over to Jonah.
Thank you. Am I coming through all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all. It's funny that SIGGRAPH reached out to me at all to do this because SIGGRAPH is responsible for getting me my first job. So when I graduated from college, I applied to all these different locations, all these different places, and didn't hear back from like any of them. And so I was kind of like figuring out like, what am I missing? What am I not getting? And I went to SIGGRAPH, the convention out in LA, and stayed with a friend, crashed on their couch, and basically then took my portfolio, which was like a physical portfolio at the time, because I'm old. And I took it to all these different like employers' desks and basically said to them, like, here's my portfolio, open it up, look through it. And tell me what you're not seeing that if you saw it, you would give me a job. And there's one guy there, he gave me the real talk. And I'll go into that in my discussion, my talk a little bit, but yeah, it was really cool. It was like I went there, I saw all kinds of amazing things, but it was just one piece of advice that I got that really like got me the job later on. So anyway, hi, my name is Jonah Lobe. I'm a character artist, creature artist, concept artist, illustrator, and fantasy arts educator and streamer. Bunch of things now. But once upon a time, I was just a character artist. So I will launch this PowerPoint presentation. If at any point there's any questions about anything, write them in the chat. And I know some of you guys have been tasked with looking out for those questions. And I will be happy to stop at intervals for questions, or we could just hit them all at once at the end. But here we go. So my name is Jonah Lobe. As you can see, I started work on the Elder Scrolls 4 Shivering Isles. That was my very first gig that I ever got when I got to Bethesda. And I worked on Fallout 3, then Skyrim, and then Fallout 4 before I left and moved on. I am a character artist, concept artist, an illustrator, an art educator, and a writer. When I was a kid, fantasy and sci-fi were obviously a huge inspiration for me, as I'm sure is the case with most of you. When I was a kid, Jurassic Park had come out. In fact, I had this making of book of making of Jurassic Park, which really inspired me to follow my dreams. I remember seeing The Thing for the first time. In fact, just today I watched the remake while I was working. Willow, if no one's seen that one, that is a classic film. The Terminator, fantastic. Akira, still one of the best ever. And The Dark Crystal, obviously remade into a show now. Gorgeous work. And my parents never got me a game system for as long as I was under their care. But we did have a computer. And so I remember I was given a floppy disk when I turned, I don't know, 12 or something. And this was many of you are maybe familiar with or have seen pictures of those kind of 3.5 inch little ones, but this was like the big floppy, like actually floppy disk, where even as like a 10-year-old, I was like, there's got to be something better than this. This is tacky. But they gave me Wolfenstein 3D and a couple other games, and from there I was hooked. Went from Doom to Quake to Half-Life, which blew my fragile little brain. Diablo, StarCraft, these things were very formative for me. But I'll tackle something that I think most of you guys want to hear about, which is the story of how I got into the industry. After I went to SIGGRAPH and showed them my portfolio, they said to me, you are very good at art, but you don't have a particular set of skills like Liam Neeson. Although, of course, that movie hadn't come out then. But essentially, they're looking, employers, he said, are looking for you to be able to do one role very, very well. And so this was exactly the kind of advice I needed. Up until then, I had a bunch of illustrations. I had some computer animation work I'd done, other stuff. And what this guy said to me is, find your job that you want and do, and show them that you know how to do exactly that. So for me, that was a character artist. So I made a couple different characters here, this little alien character, this devil character. This is what my first work in ZBrush. Character called the Murdral from, if anyone's read The Wheel of Time, there are these eyeless, pale looking dudes. I wanted to get their attitude in there. And then I did a robotic spider. And so the point of doing these four things, which are so very different from each other, was to showcase that I fully understood the character art pipeline, but that I could also tackle multiple personality types and character designs. I applied to my job. Like I said, after college, I applied. I didn't hear back. This time, I cold called one of the guys who worked there, this guy, Gary, and asked him for advice. I don't think this would work now, but I just called up and I said, "Hi, is Gary there?" Because he'd been on like their website. And they said, "Yeah, yes. Does he know who you are?" And I said, "No, but can I talk to him anyway?" And they let me talk to him. And he gave me a couple of pieces of good advice about what they were looking for. And he told me to send my portfolio directly into Todd Howard, which, as many of you guys know, is the executive producer of Bethesda. I did it. And he sent me an art test 2 days later. And it was this piece of art right here. Now, we probably all know what game this is from at the time, but they had not announced that they had acquired the right to Fallout. But I had actually played Fallout as a kid. And so I kind of saw it and I thought, oh my goodness, that looks like a franchise I know about. I knew right away when I saw this, though, that I did not have the talent needed to do all this. I couldn't make all those little details that are on this character design. This was a piece of art by the amazing concept artist Adam Adamowicz, by the way, who did 100% of the concept art for Fallout 3, a good 60% of the concept art for Skyrim, and probably like 25% of the concept art for Fallout. And then he actually passed away in the middle of that game's development. Anyway, I knew I couldn't do all the little details of this, but I knew at the same time that if I could capture the personality of this character in such a way that whoever was looking at it would be kind of arrested by the sight of it, well, then I'd have the job. So I made this guy. Tried to get into the head of a raider and create someone who looked soulless and beaten down by the world. I didn't know much about texturing at the time, so I actually scanned in my own genes and then like attach them all in Photoshop so that he would wear. So he's basically wearing my genes. So this was the best I could do, and it was not. This is not by any means a game ready model, but for them they didn't care, and I got the job. So while I was at Bethesda, my first thing was Oblivion, the Shivering Isles. In fact, this was one of the very first art assets I did for that. This was an expansion pack to that. I did a bunch of things for that, and then I moved on to Fallout 3. And Fallout 3 is where I did the most active, hard learning. I did a lot of the creature designs. This is a glowing one. This is a type of super mutant called the Super Mutant Brute. And I basically got a chance over these couple of years to really work on my modeling skills, my texturing skills, and figure out, the tricks of the trade. Because when I first got there, I really felt totally outgunned. And then I kind of found my stride with Fallout 3. There are the Rad Scorpions. There's the Feral Ghouls. They were some of my favorite because they got a lot of personality. And then I got to work on Skyrim. And this was really my big, this is probably the biggest thing that I have been known for. And probably no matter what I do, probably it'll still be the thing that I'm most known for, which is both cool and like sad as I get older and older and older. But this was a live action commercial, and they even took my dragon from the game and put it in the live action commercial. And so this was a cool moment to see. So while there, I got to work on all these different creature designs. I got to work on the Draugr, the Spriggan, the trolls, the giants, the mammoth, the dragon priests, the horkers, the mammoth, gosh, I mean, it kind of goes on. I kind of start losing track after a while. But I wanted to really evoke a feeling of wonder with this game. I thought that, yes, I have to create all these characters and creatures, and yes, they are mostly monsters, but what I loved most about the world of Skyrim was that it was full of wonder and personality and magic. And so this was for me always why the world of the Elder Scrolls was more appealing than the world of Fallout, because the world of Fallout, you go into a so-called dungeon and, the best you can hope for is like a nice Uzi and some med packs. But if you go into a dungeon in Skyrim, you could find, magic swords or talking skeletons or anything like that. So it was a pleasure to make all these different characters for this game. And my emphasis really was on creating things that were not just scary, but fascinating and eye-catching. So I got to work on things like the Draugr and their armor, which I wanted to make it look ancient and beaten like iron. I just hadn't seen that before, and it just really, really it felt. I like the handmade look of things. I like when things feel historic, like they're real. The female Draugr were similar to the male Draugr, but they're more kind of graceful, thinner, and in some ways more scary. So I did a lot of work on them as well. I worked on Alduin. He was the last boss. I even gave myself tendonitis working on him, which is not cool. Do not sacrifice your body for the game. I could have just taken a couple of weeks off and just gotten right back to him. But I was like, no, I'm 27 and I'm going to live forever. And I totally messed myself up. So, but, kind of worth it, but it didn't have to happen. But it was a pleasure working on all these characters and creating things that kind of people remember, which is really, really lucky and wonderful. One of the highlights of the game, which actually only took about a week's worth of time, were the Dragon Priest masks. These are all redone, by the way. This is not how they look in the game anymore. I've polished them for my portfolio, but they were invented by a level designer friend of mine whose name is Joel Burgess. The idea for this quest, and he kind of recruited me and said, "Do you want to do this quest? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this quest? Do you want to embark on the Dragon Priest quest with me? In that we make Dragon Priest masks for this game?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds great." And so I based it on a Nigerian mask that I own, and I kind of brought that kind of different world kind of culture into the world of Skyrim, and it blended so well. And it's really cool because there were no design documents whatsoever for the Dragon Priest masks. There's not a single line of dialogue in the whole game to support them, but they're just there. And they were my friend Joel's idea and my execution. So that was a really fun high moment in the project. And for anybody who's not familiar, who doesn't follow me on Twitter or Instagram, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but the Skyrim giants, who I wanted to look like, the farmers of this world, are based, their faces especially are based on my father. So they all look like my dad, basically. So the giants from Skyrim are 70-year-old Jewish men from Seattle, is what it comes down to. And then Fallout 4 came along. I was only worked on Fallout 4 for 9 months because at that point I knew I was going to leave Bethesda. But I got moved on ahead of others, and I got to work on the game. I got to work on the game with the art director, kind of ahead of the rest of the team, and that was a really fun experience. And probably, even though Skyrim is what I'm most proud of, I think probably my all-time best creature designs are probably from Fallout 4. And this guy in particular is my all-time favorite. So yeah, that was a pleasure as well to work on that while I got the chance. It was too bad I didn't get to see it through, like see the whole project through, but I kind of already moved on at that point. I had other plans, which I'll talk about shortly. But this guy's one of my favorites. He's got a lot, again, personality. I'm attracted to personality most of all. So, here's another character. Maybe some of you guys know about. Oops, sorry. I just apparently I can't look at chat while I'm doing this for you guys. So my bad. This is also a bit of an editing job to the texture that I did post leaving Bethesda, just because I wasn't really happy with what was in the game. This was really a fun one. I got to combine a lot of different parts of different animals to create something truly awful. And there's nothing quite as wonderful as something that is truly awful, in my mind, at least. Very briefly, because I know this is not everyone's focus by any means here. I do a lot of thinking about things like shape language and silhouette as I work. And so I take a lot of these things into account. So, this is part of a course that I've done recently on creature design. I'm trying to share as much as possible about my thought process and all that. But I know, again, this is not your guys' forte, but I just wanted to bring these up because there's various considerations and various schools of thought when it comes to things like silhouette and all that. Even in a game like Team Fortress 2, which is one of the best games ever made, silhouette was a big part of that game, and the readability, et cetera. You got the heavy, who's very blocky, who can take a lot of damage, who has a low center of gravity, the sniper, who's tall and rectangular and stationary, and the scout, who's got this quick S shape as he moves. And that shape language and that the orientation of shapes within forms is another thing I focus on. I'm quite known for adding a lot of detail, and that's kind of something I enjoy doing in my sculpts. But if you see here, a lot of what I do, I'm thinking about the very simple shapes that govern the entire thing. So this is a character I did for an online course, but you can see just how simple the fundamental shapes are, or relatively simple. And then this is a great example of the super mutant in Fallout 4. I wanted to create a large green man who with super strength, who didn't look like the Hulk. And so thanks in part to the concept art of Adam Adamowicz, I was able to create something that registered as a big, strong man, but whose basic forms and shapes are actually very taffy-like. And so it really comes down to, for me, trying to figure out how to create something that defies expectation and can give a powerful impression and get there in kind of a unique way. And to design, this is from a course of mine, and to design creatures in general, I do a lot of reference, a lot of looking at the real world. And I counsel that no matter what you do in your profession, you look at the real world as much as possible in any kind of way, or you study as many different subjects as you can, because this to me is the key to being creative, is to taking lots of different ideas and combining them into something that is totally unique. So I took, for instance, the bat ears and nose from this, and the long tufted ears of the caracal here. I took the Sphinx cat kind of hairless look and wrinkles. The fennec fox's adorable little ears, big ears, and the kind of nocturnal sensibilities, the long-bodied kind of craftiness of the Indian civet. From there, I would go through a lot of silhouettes to try to get the right kind of look and feel for this creature. And ultimately, I'll come out with something like this. This is the Night Stepper. And that's kind of just a quick top-down overview of my thought process when designing things. I was at Bethesda for 7 years. I've been gone now for 8, which is nuts. I originally left because I was going to write a fantasy novel. And I told them it would take me a year and that I might be back. And meanwhile, I wanted to move to New York because my wife was up there. Oh, she was my girlfriend at the time, but we'd already been apart for 2 years, and I was just done with that. And also, I'm from Maryland. I just didn't want to stay in Maryland forever. So I guess the question really comes down to, what have I done since then? I know most of you guys are here because you know me from my Bethesda time, but I really want to tell you about what I've been doing since then, because I know a lot of you guys are looking down the length of your own careers and you're wondering where it's going to take you and where you're going to end up and what you're going to do. And I think it's really important to not just focus on the cool, big thing, but to focus on your journey going forward. So what have I been doing in the last 8 years? I wrote a fantasy novel. It took me in total of 4 years. I told Todd Howard I'd be back in one, and it took me 4 years to write this book. I did get a book agent. She loved it. She read it like 6 times. Not just because she loved it, but because that's the point of a book agent is they look through it and they offer suggestions. But we were not able to publish it, at least not in the first round. And then, to my dismay, she left the industry altogether and went on to go to be a computer programmer. Oh, great irony. I art directed an indie game, which I'll go into. That failed. There was only 3 of us on the team, and the lead programmer who worked on Skyrim as well, he pulled out, and basically we couldn't really do it without him. Very randomly, through an odd series of really fortuitous things, I ended up being a creative director of a AAA game with a company that actually you've all heard of, but that never had gone into games. And I know that's kind of cryptic, but I can't tell you more. But that game was also canceled. I became a Twitch partner. I started live streaming after my indie game, and I ended up getting a Twitch partnership, and I've been doing live streaming ever since. Now I do it for Twitch, and I do it for Adobe as well. I published multiple online courses. They're both on creature design, and I have 2 more that are in the works, one on fantasy armor design and one on personality in the face. I've learned pen and ink art, and I've started selling that art at cons. I've developed a brand, which sounds like a weird kind of douchey thing to say, or at least I always thought it was. But recently I've really kind of figured out kind of what it is and what it means and all that. And a lot of that entailed, coming up with my general forward-facing identity, revamping my whole website, basically just figuring out who I am and what I want and what I aim to be in this fantasy gaming, computer animation, and world building world of ours. And as of a couple of days ago, I signed a contract, and I'll be spending most of this year illustrating a very cool and very unique book that I can't tell you about yet, but I will be announcing in a couple months. I'm very excited about it. It's a very weird job, and it's very cool. So yeah, this is the indie game that I worked on. It's called Fireborn. I made the creature design, and I'll fast forward to these. Actually, these are the 2 heroes. You can play a man or a woman. These are the Fireborn. As you can see, the art style started off more simply, and none of the characters had mouths. It was a top-down drawing. They're basically like Earth druids, essentially. And these are the villains. They're the villainous greed, is what they're called. And they are these awful alien creatures that have kind of totally taken over the world that you're on, and they're just repulsive and wonderful. And here's this one. He's got issues. They were really fun to work on, and this whole game was fun to work on. In fact, these are character designs that I've just shown you, but what I want to show you is that this was actually like a world that we built, like with a landscape. I built everything you see here. I built the stars, I built the trees, I built the ruins, I built the mushrooms, the rocks, the ground, the characters, the fire even. Well, no, that's not true. I did not build a fire. I thought I had a couple more. Did I have a couple more? Oh yeah. I made the moon there. I made all these things, and I totally worked my butt off, and it totally did not work out in the end. But it was an enormous learning experience. I even created the UI. If you zoom out all the way in the game, you can see you're playing on a planet covered in this weird fog. I made the UI, I made the marketing materials, I made the website. So I learned so much about game art that I'd never really known before. And so in terms of a learning experience, it was invaluable. In terms of a professional experience, it was a dud. I started getting into concept art. I'd been doing a little bit of 2D art before, but as you've seen so far, I'm known for my 3D work, but I do a lot of 2D work these days. In fact, these days I tend to avoid 3D work. I'm not as interested as I used to be. I do more painting and that kind of thing. And as you can see, I draw as much from the real world as I can to create things that have never been seen before. And I try to iterate. I try to generate lots of different ideas before creating a concept that it looks original and interesting and all that. These are some illustrations I did for my novel. This is 8 years ago I did this stuff. I wanted to create a feeling for the audience that you were really there in the world that I've created. And so to do that, I kind of created these pieces of art that I felt were that made you, the viewer, hopefully feel that you could hold these things, that there were real things in the world. This was a lot of fun to do, but ultimately I did back off of doing illustrations for the book because what I discovered early on to my in my leaving Bethesda was that I didn't think I had what it took to do this step. I'm going to talk more about this in a bit. But my concept art and my illustration kind of has marched on since then. This is for a game called Swords Fall, which is a tabletop RPG coming out. It's like an Afrofuturistic world, and I've been doing these kind of dragons for it. It had a big Kickstarter. If any of you guys are familiar with it, there was a big Kickstarter, and I was involved, and I'm doing these illustrations of these elemental dragons. So this is an earth dragon named Ryujin, and this is a fire dragon named Yobita, and he's out of his mind, as you can tell. He's a little kooky. I've done some work for System Shock. I'm sure no one here has played System Shock 2. It's a very old game, and it looks awful these days, but it is still, to date, one of the scariest games out there. And I just loved it. So I made some kind of redux artwork for it. The one on the left I did on my own time, and then I was hired by a company that was re-releasing the game to do the one on the right. And they've actually they have me doing another one now, although I'm having a hard time finding the time. This is me kind of like leveling up and figuring out new things. But I even extend this kind of work to the cartoonish. And so I've been doing a lot of cartoonish work recently because one thing I've discovered about art and design in general is that simplicity is paramount. And so while, again, I focus a lot on doing details and cool things, this is a thing I did in like 45 minutes or whatever. And the whole point of this really is to just focus on like the simplicity of a thing and explore an idea and have fun. I started doing pen and ink art. I remember I told you guys that. And I started doing this thing called Word of the Day, where I would challenge my Instagram audience to give me a word and I would try to illustrate it in some kind of interesting novel way. And I spent, about 9 months just doing all these drawings, multiple drawings a week. And really the point was it was twofold. One, I wanted to get better at drawing and illustration. Two, I wanted to expand my brand, and Instagram, if anyone's familiar with it, it requires that you feed the beast daily in order to really make an impact. And these drawings really did a lot towards teaching me the things I needed to know about illustration, and building my following, which was very helpful. This one is called Drool. This is a fun one. This is a character from my fantasy novel, actually. One day you will all know about him. Maybe not today. This one's called Gravity, and this is a going away present for some friends of mine. Really, my purpose in doing this was to get better at 2D art, and not just 2D art, but composition. When you look at like the way this is composed, it's supposed to be a big, heavy, round ball-like object just floating above an area. And as we all know, things don't float, they fall. And so when you look at this image and you hear that it's called Gravity, you think to yourself, oh dear, those little like Roman chimpanzees down there are about to be crushed. And as you can see, some of them are seeing that. They're coming to understand it immediately. So this is the series. This is the one I'm that sells best at cons. And actually the red blood here is gold in the actual print. It's called Vanquish. And it's kind of I did a lot of focusing on the composition of the thing, of a white figure on black and a black figure on white, this kind of balance of light versus dark, and a real questioning of like, well, just because one is dressed in white and one is dressed in black, is that really like, is that actually, is the guy in white the good guy? Because it sure doesn't look like it. And then in the middle of it, as you can see in the rocks in the background, you have kind of death looking on. This was a really fun one to do. I have a quick Instagram, a YouTube video explaining how I put that together for anyone who's interested. And then I think all these different drawings, most of which took a day, culminated in this picture on the left. And this is a detail of that on the right. This is a picture called Golem. I made this in 2019. I was in like quite a dark place at the time, as many of us have been over in the last couple of years. And Golem served as a kind of artistic therapy for me, which was really helpful in the long run. And it was one of those pictures. I spent 2 months on it, something like that. As you can see, this detail here is all the way down here. And I just filled up this whole page. I did this for an art gallery. They did not sell it. I didn't make any money whatsoever. But I did, as of early this year, this picture was accepted into Spectrum. So if anyone's familiar with Spectrum, the best in contemporary fantastic art, it's a book series that has been coming out since I was a kid. This was accepted. So that's a nice little thing that happened. But it really goes to show that all this buildup was kind of going somewhere. And not that it's done now, but it's just, I wanted to give myself kind of a final exam. And I wanted to make some space for myself to, work through some things. I was just a new father. So I was tired all the time. I had this little baby who was screaming at me. The Amazon rainforest was burning down. There's a lot going on. But it helped a lot. And I've also been doing some other very random things. This is the Night Stepper from before, but as a little character, as a pendant. And in preparation for the con season of 2020, which was never meant to be, apparently, I used this 3D model and I made jewelry. So I'm working with a jewelry shop, here in New York, and they've made them, some of them in brass and gold and silver, gunmetal. And even though I have not gotten a chance to sell them at cons because all the cons are dead, I've been able to sell them pretty well over the internet. And I'm really excited when I finally do get to go back into the convention scene, because I will be pushing these around to lots of people. Yeah. And there's one last thing I want to talk about before I kind of close. And I know I'm closing a little early. I kind of rushed through this because I figured there's gonna be a lot of questions. And but I want to talk about this for a while. I know a lot of you guys are thinking about, next steps and where you're going and are you good enough and et cetera. And I want to assure you that you will always feel this way. This is real. And it won't really stop. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we have to get used to it. I have failed an enormous amount in my career. And yet I feel I'm in a better position than I've ever been in a lot of different ways. These are just a handful of ways that I messed up or didn't get what I wanted or whatever. I applied to Bethesda 3 times before getting in. Between my junior and senior year, I applied for a job that they weren't even offering. Obviously, I never heard back. I applied when I left my college, never heard back. I applied to a bunch of places, never heard back. And only on the 3rd time, after I'd gone to SIGGRAPH and tweaks at things, did I get back in. I still haven't got my novel published. I've been kind of putting off applying for book agents again until I'm kind of ready again. I've got a bunch of things on my plate, so I'm going to put it off. But yeah, I left with the sole purpose of being with the woman who is now my wife and publishing a fantasy novel, and I never did it. I also wasn't able to launch that indie game. Fireborn was never born, and it never happened. And all that art is kind of now just sitting, on my computer, just kind of gathering dust. The AAA game was supposed to revolutionize so many things. And I mean that in actually truly the biggest way possible. The guy who was running this has launched multiple things before, and he was like, "This is going to change everything," and it just didn't, because it also disappeared. This happens a lot. I know a lot of you guys are looking at the game industry, and that's really cool. And the game industry is a lot of fun. It's also very unstable, as I'm sure many of you know, and not a lot of places are, stay open or are able to make it. In this case, the parent company just cut funding. So the last couple of years, I've made less money than ever. Thankfully, this year will be different. A couple of years ago, when I worked on that AAA game, I made quite a bit of money. But in the last 2 years, I have not made much money. But what I've done is balancing that out, and I can explain that later on. And it goes on and on and on. If anyone's familiar with the phrase "the road to success is paved with failure," this is life, and this is a career. There are a lot of people out there in the world, and there are a lot of people who want the job that you want. You don't even know you want the job yet. There's already like 1,000 people who want that job. Don't worry. Don't let that freak you out. You're still going to get it, but it might not look like how you thought it would. And it might take a bunch of steps to get there. But this is going to be the path of your whole career, because dreams really do change. I have a whole talk that I gave at the Ottawa International Game Conference called "My Heart Has a Nose," and I'll explain what that means in a second. But essentially, boils down to your dream that you have. Right now, when I say your dream, maybe something flashes in your mind, or a general feeling, or like a vision of what you kind of want or where you want to be. Chances are it will not take place exactly the way you think it will, but it very well could. As long as you're like kind of plugging away at it, it will take place. It just might look different than how you expect it, and that's okay, and that's good. I'll go on to this in a moment, but I want to just talk about the mechanisms that you want to put in place going forward in life. The first is practice self-love. Be humble, but love yourself, and be forgiving of yourself. Work hard, but be easy on yourself. If you didn't get that job, it's not because you're dumb. If you didn't get that job, it's not because you're not skilled. There's always an answer. There's always a way around what you've got going on. You just need to have patience in yourself, and don't feel too bad when the failure hits, because it'll hit, and you have to just kind of roll with it, like Rocky and Rocky 4, if anyone's seen that. That's also a very, very old movie. Keep failing. In fact, fail faster. A microcosm of this answer kind of comes down to, in my last 2 years at Bethesda, as I decided I wanted to make the move over to 2D art as opposed to 3D art, the best move I ever made was to decide that I would buy sketchbooks that I would never show anybody, and that I would just open them as many days in a row as I possibly could for a minimum of 20 minutes. And I would just sketch with a pen. So I couldn't erase anything, and I couldn't get anything right. I would just sketch. I would sketch things I saw. I would look online. I'd look at pictures, and I would just draw, and I would mess up like basically every drawing. I mean, truly, when I say, "Oh, my sketchbooks are awful," I know a lot of you guys are rolling your eyes and going, "No, I bet they're amazing." No, they're really bad. Like, they're very bad. That is the point. And that is actually so much of the purpose of creative design in general, and of trying anything. So learning how to quickly iterate, quickly draw, and get the failure out of the way, because with every failure comes a chance and an opportunity to learn something about what you just learned. Take criticism. I think one of the hallmarks of a designer or developer who's not really going anywhere is somebody who thinks that they're awesome and can't and don't have anything to learn from you. They are going to fall behind. We all have blind spots. We all have things we're not that good at. And even if we're good at them, we all need to hear opposing viewpoints. One of the things that I miss the most about working at Bethesda is being able to stand up from my desk, walk over to my coworker's desk, and say, "Hey, can you come to my desk and take a look at what I've got?" And whatever feedback they had, I wouldn't necessarily accept it all, but I would listen to it all. And I would try to see their point of view, and I would be open to changing things. Always be open to taking criticism, and always be open to changing things. We have a tendency to think that we can figure it out ourselves, when in reality, we need to have input. We need to have people telling us their own thoughts, because we need to see things from a different perspective. It always helps, and it always adds more ingredients to your inner pot. And that's what you really need to be consistently creative and to consistently create quality content. You need a lot of material in your head so that you can kind of piece it together in your head and output it into the world. I should have put this one after keep failing, but learn from your mistakes and grow. I think the best thing that you can do to keep growing is to develop the talent to recognize your own deficiencies. Like I said, the people who can't take criticism are bound to fall behind. If you can take criticism, and if you can look at your own work and look at it and say, oh, it's not right because of this, and this, and yet, I should mention, not feeling bad about that. Just objectively look at it and say, these are 4 reasons why it's not working, or these are 5 reasons, whatever. I've identified them. Then you know your weaknesses, and then you can grow and you can change and you can adapt. So I think that people who aren't able to look at their own work in a critical way are going to not know how to evolve that work. Now, again, the other side of that is looking at your work critically and not beating yourself up about it. And that goes back to point 1, practice self-love. And then the last one is grow in the direction of your heart. And that sounds silly, and that sounds like something a Disney character would say. Just imagine I have fairy wings and I'm giving you this advice. What I mean by that is that this dream job of yours, the one that you want, I believe that you will get it. I do. Sooner or later, you will get that job, and you're going to get there, and you're going to find out within the first couple of weeks, or if you're lucky, within just, within as most of a couple of years, or maybe 6 or 7 years, you'll realize that it's not your dream anymore, and that you want to do something else. And maybe it's not something totally different. You might not suddenly go from computer programming to like woodworking and whittling, but you might learn that, oh, you know what? I'm much more interested in how sound design interacts with programming or whatever. So you start heading in the direction of your interests over the course of your career. And the fact that you guys are, where you are right now and you're learning what you're learning means that you are in such a fortunate position to work in a very creative field, and where you can kind of continue to adapt and to learn new things and become a specialist in different roles. I just want you to be aware that this dream job you have will not be your ultimate life dream. It won't, because life, if all goes well, is long, and dreams change. When I graduated college, what I wanted most of anything was to be a character artist. And I was a character artist for 7 years. I still love character art, but I love a whole bunch of things more than that. And I've learned that Jonah Lobe is more than just a character artist. And you are more than just the thing you want to be. So, as per my advice at the beginning, the advice that I got at SIGGRAPH, when you want that first job, it pays to specialize, but you will not be specializing for life. You will be going in different directions, and you will be growing. And you really, I would encourage you to be as open to that growth as possible. Thank you. So that's the crux of it there. I hope that was helpful, and I'm
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was.
Nice. Thank you. Glad you guys enjoyed.
Yeah, that was super
thank
great.
you so much.
My pleasure.
It's honestly really good to hear about how you've gone through all this stuff in your career, because everyone just thinks that it's smooth sailing and stuff like that, and it's really cool that even after you got that dream job, you still had to deal with these struggles. And it's good to know that, like, that feeling, even though that whole feeling of the imposter syndrome, because, like, I would say 95% of us in here probably have that feeling as well. So I'm really glad to kind of hear that it's not necessarily something that goes away, but it's something you learn to deal with. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big thing that a lot of people don't talk about, or don't come face to face with. I do think that yeah, I think that imposter syndrome was also kind of important in some ways, at least because what it tells you is that you are in past your depth. You are doing things that you are uncomfortable doing, and you think to yourself, damn, who am I? I shouldn't be doing this thing. Like, I can't do these things. So it feels like every step of this one way, I'm Googling things. I'm looking on forums. Like, it's like nothing is coming easily. Like this, I'm not meant to do this. But, I have a 1.5-year-old. She's learning things so fast. It's not like she turns 18 and then she's like done learning. The whole point of this life and all these things is to continue to learn, continue to try new things. If you're not out of your depth on a regular basis, you will not grow. So I left Bethesda. Again, I wanted to be with my wife. I wanted to write the fantasy novel, but actually, I was kind of just done doing concepts, 3D work, because I wasn't growing. The work that I was doing, the quality of that work, as you saw from what I showed you, got way better over the course of 7 years. But I was using the same programs. I was using the same pipeline. I was doing bigger and better looking things, but it was the same job day in, day out for 7 years. It was very cozy. It was very pleasant. And I could have stayed there for the rest of my career. And I'm so glad that I didn't. And it isn't just about that. I've heard things about the culture there that have not made me feel good in the last couple of years. Truly, like the last 8 years in many ways were way harder than the 7 years at Bethesda. You get a desk job, that's pretty cushy. But again, didn't grow, and I needed to grow. And so I'm truly, in my heart of hearts, just thankful that I left and that I've had some nice years, some not nice years, a lot of discomfort in between, but I am, the Jonah Lobe of now versus the Jonah Lobe in my like Bethesda prime is just, I know how to contact and talk to reporters. I've written a book. I've written multiple courses. I've done all these different things, right? And it's not like I'm suddenly the expert in all these things. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. And the fact that I'm doing it like makes me look more professional, but it kind of just doesn't ever go away. And so that's why I say imposter syndrome is real, and get cozy with it, get to know it, because what it means is that you are putting yourself in a position to learn and to grow.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think we'll kind of transition to questions now. I know there's 5 minutes left technically, but I mean, of course, people are free to stay after. If you have to go, then you can go. Thank you for coming, but we'll move on into Q&A. So if you want to unmute your mics and speak, you can do that, or you can type in the chat, whichever you feel comfortable with. It's good.
Hey, Jonah.
Hello.
Really nice to meet you. I spoke to you a little over Instagram, but I've been super inspired by your stuff over the years. Didn't know Shivering Isles was your first game, but that's really awesome. Or first at Bethesda, but that expansion in particular inspired the hell out of me when I played it. I was like 16 or 17. And, I had tinkered around in like Valve's engine for making maps and stuff at that age, but I had never done 3D modeling. And yeah, I have to say, between that and just like your courses, both Chimera and the Grogan, those helped me tremendously breaking through the 3D pipeline. And just character design. But it's really interesting what you're saying, especially at the end of your talk, because I find myself in the opposite end of the spectrum. I've been very much a 2D artist. I studied painting in school, and now I'm transitioning into 3D. And it's funny that you're transitioning into 2D, but I kind of like wanted to pick your brain and like, do you feel the pipeline is too cumbersome? Is that part of the reason that you're sticking to 2D? It's just you can get designs finished so much faster? Or what's the exact, like, if you
I
could
do.
pinpoint it?
Great question. Great question. And thanks for all the kind words. Um, when you're making a character or a creature, an object, it is a standalone thing that exists by itself, and it will be put into the game, and it'll do certain things in the game. But as an artist, I can do a lot of storytelling through the look of a thing and through all this stuff, but ultimately, I can't tell a story with a game model. It is a game model that is meant to be viewed as part of a much larger whole. With two-dimensional art, you can tell stories, and you can do it with very little effort. Very simple visuals can be very moving and very interactive. And so I really want to be able to capture moments. I want to be able to make people stop and look closer. And there are also just elements, to 3D where it's very technical. There's a lot of different technical steps, a lot of, retopology and building of the low poly and UV mapping, et cetera. And it's pleasing, because in that it's kind of this like artisan kind of, thing where you're building something kind of slowly, but you can't iterate very fast. You can't tell these visual stories. And there's these certain elements that artistic elements that work really well in sculpting, but work way better in like drawing. So for instance, things like edge control, shading, contrast, the use of gradients, shape language, that kind of thing. There's just a lot of things that when I look at an amazing painter, I think I see not just an ability to render an image, but I see this profound kind of artistic control where they can create this huge tableau of art, and yet the artist knows where I'm going to be looking, and because they directed the drawing in that way. So it's a lot of control there and a lot of storytelling ability. And it presented a whole host of new challenges that I kind of felt like, again, it's not that I couldn't keep getting better at something like ZBrush or something. If you look at somebody like Raphael Grassetti, who works on God of War, Raphael Grassetti, that dude is like a ZBrush like master. And he has built an entire career, massive career.
He's a wizard.
He's a wizard. But I'm just not interested. I don't want to play that game. I kind of want to immerse myself in a world where I'm going to be learning all these new things and all these new subjects, and I'm going to be growing. And yeah, so that's the answer.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was very thorough. I appreciate that. Your designs inspired 3 creatures that I recently finished, and
Nice.
I'm really inspired by your site too. Like the way you have your turntables. Is that through ArtStation? Is that like that you got those embeds?
Those are from a combination of Marmoset exports and Sketchfab embeds. Sketchfab.
Oh, okay.
I think
Okay,
is
Sketchfab.
well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see here that, by the way, M had said that there was a few questions from Katie. What was your major? I was a studio art major. I wanted to be an English minor, but I wasn't able to pull the credits. But yeah, I was a studio art major in college. And so for my final thesis, I did like a little like 4.5 minute like computer animated film about some funny looking aliens who meet up in an Egyptian temple at night to play dice, and they wake up a mummy. And I did these 4 large ink drawings that were like my very first foray into like artistic therapy, because I had lost a friend my senior year, and I did these 4 huge ink drawings, which obviously I got back to the ink many years later. But yeah, studio art major. And that was actually part of the reason I didn't get a job outside of college when I got out of college, because I was very good at art, but I didn't have any technical know-how. I mean, even by the time I like left Bethesda, I was definitely one of the most technologically illiterate individuals at the company. So I just kind of just try to make up for that in just like art, doing that. So Jessica Clements asks, what do you think was your inflection point in your career? And what college did you graduate from? I graduated from Skidmore College in upstate New York. What do I think was an inflection point in my career? The most recent major inflection point was about 2 years ago. I was working on that big AAA game, and then it got canceled. And I was just floating. And I went from being paid huge amounts of money to nothing. And I just thought to myself, I can't keep working on these like 1 to 2 year sprints on projects and that fall through. It's like it's exhausting to me. And so I decided to figure out a way to kind of secure my future. My life goal has always been to write this fantasy series. I'm like wedded to this to the hilt. Like my goal in life, and I'm not really kidding you, is like just don't die before finishing these. Like just don't like look both ways when you cross the street. Like just don't do it. I just got to like get this fantasy series out. So I thought to myself, what is the best way that I can do that without just jumping in and writing them all now? Because, there was still like, I finished the first book and my agent helped me break it into 2 books, but I had more books I want to write and I was still outlining them. And so how do I build a foundation for myself where I have some stability? And that came down to passive income, a way to make money without having to work on these individual jobs, because they just suck up all your time and energy. And I'm a huge perfectionist. So when I take on a new job, I really can't let it go until it's just right. And so I started working on my brand. I designed my website, redesigned it. I even consulted like my friend from Skidmore, who was a brand specialist, and she helped me find out what my brand was, because I thought, I don't know, just the word brand is gross, and I didn't feel peaceful about it. But then when I kind of came to realize, no, my brand is like inspiring, creative, like loving, like that. I was like, oh, I could be those things. I don't have to be like a selling my work kind of douchebag, pardon my language. I can say these things and I can believe in them, and I can like go forward in my career feeling these things. So between doing all these pieces of ink art that I can now sell at conventions, building out some courses that provide me a little bit of income on the side, and I want to keep making more courses because I really, really like doing that. I'm now moving into YouTube. That's my big 2020 thing. I'm doing this private illustration contract, and then in a couple months that will become public, and I'll be working on that on my YouTube channel in a big way. Essentially, my goal here is to establish myself as Jonah Lobe, like in big letters, and then essentially just buy myself the freedom to, moving forward, make enough money to support myself, while putting all my efforts into the fantasy novel, and hopefully also like making illustrations for it, etc. So it was a moment where I went from kind of contractor, jumping from thing to thing, to being like, from now on, I am not doing anything that doesn't make me Jonah Lobe, like it doesn't help me on that path. So that was a big inflection point for me. There's one little quick story I wanted to tell about imposter syndrome real quick, because I want you guys to hear this, because it's I kind of forget it because it's been so many years now. But when I left Bethesda, I was psyched. I was like, yes, I'm gonna move to New York. I'm gonna be with the woman I love. I'm gonna write this book that I've been outlining and drafting for so long. I'm gonna do it, y'all. And I got there and I started working, etc. And I started getting these asthma attacks. And I couldn't figure out what's going on. I had some asthma as a kid, but these were like, ever growing, ever more serious. And they'd come on for kind of no reason. I'd be in like the subway and I started getting an asthma attack and all this stuff. Eventually my wife said, maybe they're panic attacks. And I said, that's ridiculous. I'm not panicked. I'm cool. I'm good. Like I'm happy. I got my dream job. I'm living in New York. I'm writing my fantasy novel. This is the life. And what I realized when I was honest with myself was I was writing a novel, and I'd never written a novel before. And I was illustrating a novel, and pardon my language, but I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I'd never done two-dimensional art to this degree. I was a three-dimensional like dude, and here I was working to 2Ds, and I thought, I have no idea what I'm doing. I moved to New York. I left the best job ever. I left my family. I moved to New York. I'm now committed to this woman who I definitely love, but now we're really in it though. I'm in a small New York apartment. I don't know anybody here. What have I done? And once I kind of realized that I was having panic attacks, I was able to kind of control them and relax into it. And a lot of the way I did that is instead of trying to control them, I kind of just acknowledged it's okay to feel this way. And if you feel a panic attack coming on, just be like, okay, this is gonna suck. I'll just ride it out and breathe through it. And eventually they went away. But I wanted to share that with you all because that, it just goes to show you to the extent to which I had no idea what I was doing and I was totally out of my element. And so so listen to your body, listen to your mind, and really, question where you're at, etc. Okay, here we go. Looking at some of the, there's a bunch of comments. What was some of the best portfolio advice that helped you land your first job as a character artist? It was to specialize in character art in that pipeline, demonstrate proficiency in the pipeline. That was the best portfolio advice. Also, the best portfolio advice I could give today, now in general, would be to narrow the number of things that you show in your portfolio to only like your very best. Don't show them a huge range of things, show them a small range of things that are awesome. Technically speaking, for those of us interested in creature or character design, what programs do you recommend for the industry? ZBrush, probably. I can't think of any other programs that would lend themselves specifically to creature and character design, but ZBrush would be the one. Yeah. I love your YouTube videos. I have a playlist saved of them. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it. Jordan says, what was the work environment like at Bethesda while working there? And what were some key attributes you believe some of your team members brought to the table while working on assets? The work environment was really cool. I think it has suffered since then, but I got there at a really good time in the company when I first got there was about 55 people working at Bethesda. And when I left, there was about 110. And it was just big enough that we could make these big games and just small enough that you kind of knew everybody. So that was really lovely. And I was given a lot of freedom, which is important to me. And what were some key attributes you believe some of your team members brought to the table? I mean, that's hard to say because there's so much talent there, not everyone's amazing, but a lot of people there were amazing. And it was always the synergy between people that really yielded the best results. My friend Jean, who I worked on Fireborn with, he invented the critter system in Skyrim. So all those little lightning bugs, all those flies, all those butterflies you can catch out of the air, that was he and I just working together. He made a system where the butterflies would come out at certain hours during the day, et cetera, things like that. The Dragon Priest mask, that was a collaboration between two people. Always it was, the magic happened when people got together, put their heads together and combined their strengths. What were your first days at Bethesda like? Asks Emma. Hi, Emma. Did you have a mentor who helped you learn their workflow? Man, the first days were wild. I didn't know what I was doing. I kept looking around being like, am I really here? Like, what's going on? I was 22, 23. I was youngin'. But yeah, some people took me kind of under their arm. I did have a higher up in the character art department who kind of helped me out, especially with texturing, because texturing kind of freaked me out a little bit. But what I did know, which nobody there knew at the time, was ZBrush. And so that gave me a leg up in the reverse direction. So that was very helpful. There was never one mentor, but I will say that I learned a great deal from a lot of people, But Adam Adamowicz, the concept artist who I mentioned, who passed away, he ended up being the biggest long-term influence on me. This dude got up every day. He would take public transportation to work. He lived in DC, so it was like an hour-long, multiple buses, et cetera. And he would just sketch in his sketchbook the whole way there. He'd get there, he'd draw, he'd work through lunch, he'd do all these things. And after work, he'd go and he'd work out. And then he would just drink a bottle of wine and do more painting and like sculpture and things like that at home. And then when he died, it really drove home to me that like, we do not know how much time we have on this earth, and we should be working our butt off. We should be in the direction of our passions. And so that was intensely formative for me. So if anyone's curious to know more about him, I wrote an article about him that was published on Kotaku, I guess about 6 years ago. You can just look it up, Jonah Lobe, Adam Adamowicz. It's called The Life and Creativity of a Great Bethesda Artist. I'll write it here, The Life and Creativity of a Great Bethesda Artist. It's all about being a concept artist, but it's also just about being, about pursuing your dreams. So I hope you guys like that. Nathan said, probably you are among the artists in which I study. Oh, thank you very much. Who are the artists you look at and study? That's such a list. Nathan, I'm so sorry. I don't have a concrete answer for that, because thanks to Instagram, thanks to Twitter, I have like 75 heroes right now. There are so many people out there that like, this person's better at me than that, and this person's better than me at this. And it's like, it's everywhere I look, there's people who are just nasty at their job. And it's very inspiring. So, when it comes to creature design, I like someone like Kika Lexova or Bryn Metheny or Tyrell Whitlatch. When it comes to sculpture and design, there's like Darren Bartley, there's Raphael Grassetti, obviously. The list, it goes on and on. I think the best way for me to answer that would just be to pick up my Instagram and start scrolling. So if you're interested and you want to see some cool art, check out who I'm following on Instagram and check out who I'm following on Twitter, because the list will go on and on and on. It's incredible. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I will, this might interest you. We actually will be having Tara Whitlatch as a speaker in this fall semester. I believe October is what we're shooting for.
Well, I don't think she knows who I am, but please tell her hello for me. I follow her on social media. I don't think she follows me. And I'm like, come on, Tyrell. Come on, follow me. Tell her hello for me. She's awesome. She's amazing. So Phil says, as someone that is currently learning with Blender for character and environment design, would Blender software be something compatible for any industry works? Yes and no. Yes, in that whatever you create in Blender, totally acceptable for your portfolio. Totally great. No problem at all. As long as you are going through the game art platform, you want to be a character in environment design, as long as you're still doing the things like creating low poly maps and texturing and all that, you're gold. Once you get to where you're going to be, they won't use Blender after that. So thankfully, a lot of these programs are somewhat analogous. So after a little bit of an uphill battle learning one software over another, the skills required are the same. So if that's what you're learning on now, keep doing it. It's not a problem at all. But ultimately you might have to change. I know I learned on like Maya, and then I got to Bethesda, and they're like, here's this thing called 3D Studio Max. And I was like, oh no, I don't know this at all. So yeah. Jordan says, it's always difficult to maintain a culture once the company gets so large. Indeed. Katie says, when you were working on characters for a game, were the deadlines really strict and stressful, or did you have a little flexibility? I had some flexibility. We had some flexibility. We didn't have awful crunch time, and they planned out things pretty well. And also, I think I was given, rather than being rapid fire delivered a bunch of projects, I was given a lot of the characters and creatures. So these are longer term projects. So I would have a period of like a month to make a thing. So I would say I had a pretty, I myself had a pretty flexible schedule, and I'm grateful for that. Emma says, what kind of advice would you give to students trying to add more detail to their 3D characters? I know a lot of times I struggle with adding detail to character models and they end up being really soft. Yes, the softness is a thing, especially with ZBrush. Okay, as you're working in ZBrush, don't subdivide down to the granular level right away. Get a low poly mesh, subdivide it like twice and start working from there. And what that's going to force you to do is to focus on the big shapes and really maximize the big shapes. And then when you've got that to a good point, hit the subdivide button like once and then work some more. And what you're doing basically is you're working from big to small. And what happens when we subdivide too much, then we end up with this very kind of detailed just sphere. They have to push and pull, and we can't help but treat it like it's this big piece of putty. But if we keep working from big to small and get more and more into the details as we go, we preserve these simple elements that are ultimately what gives something its visual power. And we are able to maintain those kind of mid-level details. Now, a lot of, game companies will try to impress you. They'll send you, they'll show progress pics of a character's face, and you see all the pores in it and all that stuff. But you don't see that stuff in game because most of the time you see characters from kind of a mid to long range. So what matters most in that aspect are kind of the mid-sized details and all that. And then so as you're working on your ZBrush model, you're kind of working more and more and more detailed. Ultimately, what you're going to want to be looking at when you're looking at the highest level detail is you're going to be wanting to look at real pictures of real things, whether that's human skin or crocodile skin or granite or wood, whatever. But don't jump to that surface level detail at the beginning or even in the middle. Do that kind of towards the end, because at that point, all the hard work has been done. Todd Howard used to do this really cruel thing to me, where I would make a creature and I would pour my life into all the details and all that. And I would show it to him and he'd be like, that looks great. Now quarter the texture. And I would raise a fit. I was like, I can't do that. Like, what are you talking about? And it's like, cut the number of polys in half. And I'm like, you're a madman, like that. But he was right. I would quarter the texture and I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between my like 4096 and my 2048. Or my 2048, my 1024, I couldn't tell the difference. And that is because we form an impression of something like that upon seeing it. And the details are in fact the least important aspect. So as you're modeling, as you're sculpting, focus on the big things, then focus on the mid-sized things, and do the small details for last. It's like if you're a hitman, you learn the sniper rifle first, then the shotgun for the close range, and the last thing you learn is the knife, for the up close. Sorry, anyone see the movie The Professional? It's a good one. Anyhow, thanks for posting the links, everybody. When it comes to working with 3D, what are your thoughts on working with traditional clay sculpting for maquettes? I have never done that, so I don't know if I have any thoughts. I would like to one day, but no. But I think, that's similar to what I just said, which is we work from big to small. Whenever I look at really good sculptors, they what do they do first? They build up their masses, and they put on these big chunks of putty, and then they start carving and working from that. So that's my advice there. So there you go. I think that was at least the questions I was able to get that I saw come in since I started the post.
It looks like you've answered them all by the looks of it.
Great. Wonderful. Any live questions at all?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
So I've been a longtime follower of your Twitter, and I believe you said that you never had a gaming console. Is that correct?
What do you mean?
You're like growing up and stuff?
A gaming? Oh yeah, I never had a console. Yeah.
Okay, so when you were back in the Bethesda days and even now, would you keep up with what's trending with gaming, and how would you do that? without the game console, of course?
Good question. I mean, I did still play a lot of computer games. I still love computer games. They're like, I'm kind of like a PC gamer myself. But would I keep up with gaming trends? To some extent, not as much as you might think. As an artist, I'm and not a designer. I'm granted the luxury of not having to look at everybody's game as it comes out, because art is kind of art universally, and so it's like what looks good, and there's a lot of principles that guide the pillars of art. Now, I can certainly, when a game like Dishonored comes out, well, I want to play Dishonored because they are doing things that I've never seen before. Their games look like oil paintings, that kind of thing. And I'm looking at like the Half-Life series. I mean, the art that spawned Half-Life 2 is just like stunning and gorgeous. In fact, I believe there's overlap in one of the artists there. I think one of the artists who worked on Half-Life 2, the concept artist, worked on Dishonored. So there's some games I have to play because I need to see what they're doing. I just played was it Alone? Is that or Inside? Inside. If anyone's played that, you can beat it in an hour and a half. It's stunning. It's stunning. It does so much with so little. It's incredible. So I have to play games like that. But when it comes to like following general trends in games, I haven't been interested in a long time, actually. But that's probably because I'm not a designer, so I don't have to think about the way a game plays. Incidentally, that was my problem with Fireborn, is I didn't think enough about how the game played. I thought about how it looked and not how it played, and I think that's probably one of the reasons we died, because we didn't know what a game was. So we could have really used some more studying of other games then, but kind of, pick yourself up and try again later on, I guess. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And fantastic talk, by the way. It was amazing.
Oh, thank you very much.
What did you model for the Shivering Isles? If I have.
Sure. I did a couple of the armors, like the Madness armor and the Amber armor and the Golden Saints armor. I did the Scalons. That was my first creature I ever made, was the Scalon. I made the Skinned Hounds, which I don't like at all. I did a bad job. And for the Knights of the Nine, I did like the Aurorans and the Umaril, I believe, is the last boss from that.
Oh, nice! You did him.
I did him. Yeah.
Nice.
He was. Yeah, that was fun. That was the first character that was like really like, ooh, I think I got it. But yeah, that was the first stuff I did for those games. Yeah.
Super cool. Thank you.
Of course. Katie says, just curious, did you play Fallout and or Skyrim? Not really. When you work on a game, so in the last 6 months of development, or last like year, there's a lot of bugs to fix, especially if you work at Bethesda. And that's the programmer's job for the most part. There's tweaks that I need to be making a lot, but my art doesn't generally cause bugs because it's a game model. And also often I'm making the character, and then from there it goes to the animator. And if there's issues there, it's the animator's fault. So I was in this really lucky position to not have to do a lot of bug fixing. What I had to do is I had to play test the game and find bugs. So I at a certain point had to stop making art, and I had to just start playing the game all day, every day. And of course it's broken because it's a half-made game. And so I just played it for months and months, and it was cool because I got to see the game come together more and more and become more complete. But by the time it was done, I was done. I was like, I hear it. There's no game. I hear there's very few bugs now, but I'm done. I did play Fallout 4 though, because I only worked on that game for 9 months. And so when I left, there was several years there where I didn't see it, hear it. All I had of my work on it was some screenshots of the Deathclaw on my phone, which I would occasionally covetously look at and be like, there's my baby. One day you will come out into the world. So when Fallout 4 came out, I did play that because I hadn't played a Bethesda game that I hadn't worked on since Morrowind, and I was desperate. So I was really excited about that. But in general, no, it's kind of like, when you're in the kitchen and you see how it's made, you're kind of like, yeah. And all the little happy accidents that people kind of put together to their own little story, you like just, you know what bug caused that and you know what's doing that. And so it kind of like ruins the magic a little bit. With that said, I do want to go back. I want to install a bunch of mods and I want to go back. Maybe I'll do that for the 10-year anniversary of Skyrim's coming up. So maybe I'll do that then. So Jessica says, you went from being specialized to expanding into your career. I feel like I am the opposite, where I have many hobbies and interests in a lot, and I am not sure about specializing in a specific area. What advice can you give me? Thank you. Yeah, Jessica, I would focus on one thing on the outset. As you're looking to get a job, figure out 1 or 2 jobs that you think are perfect for right now, and take a little time, take a couple months to generate a portfolio that reflects your awesomeness in those areas. Because ultimately you are just trying to get a job, right? And once you get that first job, then it becomes easier to get the next, and so on and so forth. It's beautiful that you are into many hobbies and interests. It's very important, and it says a lot about you as a person, that you're curious and you're excited and there's a lot of things you want to do. That will serve you very well over the course of your career. But to get that first job, ultimately, specialists in this industry tend to get hired faster than generalists, because people want to know that they can hire you on day one, and by lunchtime, you're already working. So you can also remember, you can also take 1 or 2 of the disciplines that you're interested in and see if you can combine them to create something interesting. Like if you're into animation and environment art, start making trees that blow in the wind, or stone doors that roll closed, or anything like that, where basically you showcase a powerful Venn diagram of abilities. That could help you a lot as well. What's your favorite thing to model? Characters, I think. I like characters. I still love characters so much. Favorite subjects to draw? Monsters, anatomy. Ultimately, it does come down to characters, but that has less to do now with the characters themselves and more to do with like the circumstances around the character and the story that it's telling. So yeah, but you should, Raneem, you can take a look at my Instagram and just see what I've been doing and get a general sense of the things I like to draw, because that'll give you the best and surest outlook. Would it be possible for you to conduct a portfolio review? I know I'd be personally willing to pay for one. Yeah, I'm open to that. If people are interested, I don't have a ton of time, but feel free to hit me up on Instagram, and if and when I'm able to get some time together, I will do that. I will say that at the moment I am working on this illustration job, and I am a bit behind, so I won't be able to leap on it. But it's the kind of thing I'm always, especially if it's an informal thing where you send me your portfolio and I can write something up to you. I can do that, sure. Is movie development similar to game development, and have you thought about moving to the big screen? I don't know enough about that to say one way or the other. I don't think it's very similar. Some of the pipelines are similar, but because you're not working on an open world or a world in which you're working on a series of assets, but you're working on a series of shots. So really, you're almost like designing things for particular shots in that. And have I thought about moving to the big screen? No. If and when I do that, I would like to be in kind of maybe a concept art role or a creative lead of some kind. And let's be real, that's not going to happen. So I think probably not. I think, we had a saying at Bethesda, Todd had a saying at Bethesda, which was, we can do everything. We can do anything, but we can't do everything. Meaning, the world is your oyster, and anything you choose to make, you can make, but you can't make all the things that you want to make. You have to really select what you're going to do and do those. And in life, I want to illustrate, I want to do concept art, I want to write fantasy novels, and I feel like probably I got to stop there and just maybe focus on that for a while. Ooh, there's a mod that brings a character called Siren Head into Fallout. That's cool. I would definitely want to add that. So I realized now I've been following a lot of your recent work through Rowena Frenzel. I love Rowena. She's great. Yeah, wonderful. That looks like it's all the questions. Great. Well, if that's all, then I I do have to, I guess, call it then. So thanks for having me on, everybody. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us your
Thank you for
time and
coming.
giving that amazing presentation and then staying so long to answer all these questions. There are some great questions, some great answers. I know all of us appreciate it a whole lot. So thank you, Jonah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you guys so much. You guys were a great audience, great questions all around, and I hope that was helpful. And if there's any last questions or whatever, feel free to find me on Instagram. Find me on YouTube. I wouldn't be who I am if I'm not going to plug my stuff. So yeah, find me on YouTube. And have a great day, everybody. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend, and good luck in all the things that you guys are doing respectively, because I know you guys all have dreams and machinations, and as I said, they will come true. Just keep plugging away at it and keep failing, and you're gonna be just fine. So thanks everybody. Have a great day.